Our session is going to be about urban regeneration, designing intelligent and sustainable cities. And this session will be under the moderation of Mr. Hilmar von LOJEWSKI, who is the head of the Department of Urban Development, the Association of German Cities. I'd like to invite him on the stage, and he will do the presentation of other speakers. Thank you.
Sayın katılanlar, sevgili arkadaşlar, şehir plancılar özellikle, Türkçem bir moderasyon için aslında biraz zayıf oluyor. Buna rağmen en azından başlangıçta biraz Türkçe konuşmaya çalışıyorum, unutmamak için. Ben 1984-85 yılında misafir öğrenci olarak bir sene Otel'de okudum. O zamandan beri unutmamaya çalışıyorum. Sabahta we have izin verirsiniz şimdi İngilizce değişeceğim. In the morning we had some striking presentations by the international mayors. In the afternoon we had some striking presentations by our Turkish mayors. And well, before it becomes to be a kind of beauty contest, I would like to put the term smart cities into the context which we apply, which we try to apply also in the German cities. I can assure you the German cities compete internationally as well as the Turkish cities do on this term, try to fill it with content. But I believe at the same time it's also necessary to put the smart cities term into the context. But first of all, let me convey the greetings from Berlin. The heraldic sign of Berlin is a bear. And you see the Berlin bear designed by a Turkish artist, Mustafa Üçbilek. And I'd just like, because I haven't been here for very long, best greetings from Berlin. I represent the City Association of the German cities, and I need to briefly introduce you to this. The association represents 52 million urban population in Germany, 200 member cities. It's an independent voice, it's a community of solidarity. It represents the idea of local self-government to the central government. It negotiates with the government, it interconnects the cities, the mayors, councillors, heads of departments, and transfers innovations and good and bad lessons learned. I believe it's also important to convey and to talk about the bad lessons. As we have heard in the morning, making mistakes is not a mistake. Making the same mistake twice is a mistake. It initiates activities, and it's organized a little bit like a CEO since 1905. When we talk about cities, we talk about images, and I've found 4 postcards of the cities of the distinguished mayors. This is not how the cities look today, but this is how the cities looked in the past, and this is what obviously one image of the city could be. And we'll see how these images change in the wake of the smartness of cities. The organizers have given us a lot of questions, dear mayors and dear Shekip KARAKAYA, and we will see whether we comply with that. I'm so far away from you, but I'll approach you later on. But I was allowed to give a certain introduction to the term smart cities. What is it about? It's about the mutual understandings, it's about integrated urban development, and it's about examples for innovative projects and the lessons learned. And you don't see the word smart here because I try to avoid it. Why is it so? Because I don't want the technological impetus of smartness dominate urban development. It's the other way around. Urban development should incorporate technologies, smart technologies, to perform better. This is an image of another city which has no access to the sea, that is Quito. And maybe it's a starting point. for my today's brief presentation, because it's a site where the Habitat 3 conference on the new urban agenda took place last year in October, where the German Association of Cities contributed largely on self-governance and on basic urban services. And I also have a very personal connotation to this. To the left you see my grandmother, who has experienced 103 years of urban development as a Frankfurter and Berliner. And she has seen the first electric vehicles driving in cities, 1914, 18, 20. And until then, it was electricity which dominated car traffic in cities. Taxis, buses, trucks were driven in the large cities in Europe and the US by electric engines, they were electrically propelled. And it's only after 1918, 1920 that the fuel-driven cars won. The first Porsche, ladies and gentlemen, was an electric Porsche, 1905, the Lohner Porsche. She has experienced the electrification of traffic. She has experienced the twice defeat of Germany in wars. She has experienced the increase of floor area ratio per capita from 12 square meter in the 1920s to 45 square meter today. So what I want to say with this is it's important to look back and to carry the experience we have with our ancestors and ourselves also to the future and adapt it further. And the right young lady is my youngest daughter, who will probably live until 2100. And this is my intrinsic motivation to work on urban development, on a better future of cities and regions, and also to work on, maybe to a certain extent, smartization of cities. This is our intrinsic driver. It's not about technology, it's about the people, and to maintain the world in a status that it remains livable also for the coming generations. We have megatrends, but are there also mega problems? Individualization, digitization, urbanization, mobility, a lot of colliding interests. I believe, and we believe in the German Association of Cities, that a common denominator for this is integrated urban development. This is the key towards a balanced, sustainable, and maybe even smart urban future. So I'd like to come to some mutual understandings with you on this term, integrated urban development, sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals, Habitat 3, and two other terms which came up this morning once, resilience, and didn't come up yet, that is sufficiency. Integrated urban development is very simple. It's an interdisciplinary approach, it's an integrative approach, and it shall generate synergies. I think everyone who represents smart technologies claims the same for his or her technology. So what is composed of parts so that it forms a uniform whole, Aristotle said, which is obviously more than the sum of its parts. That is synergy. And if we do not detect synergies from smart technologies, then we should not probably invest in smart technologies. Where are we heading for? We are heading for preserving historic cities and preparing for the future. And in Germany, we talk about the European city. I talk about the Oriental city, as I used to work also in the Middle East for a couple of years. And maybe the Oriental city is even the better European city. It's dense, it's mixed, and it provides for short distances. The initial Oriental city is made of this, and simply for these three factors, density, mixture of uses, short distances, this solution for a sustainable urban development. So it's the Oriental basics, so to say, which might guide us to a smart future. Integrated sustainable urban development, what are the essentials? These are robust and adaptable plans and programs, nothing fixed for years or even decades. It's the careful consideration of permanent investments. It's a space to maneuver for future options for action and changes because, and this we have learned also this morning, very strikingly, changes are so rapidly, the plans are simply too slow to keep pace. So they need to be very open. And in that regard, I play a little bit the owl You remember this morning, the mayor from Tirana told the joke about the owl who sets out the strategies but doesn't tell how to achieve them. I'm a little bit the owl now in this game, but I have 3 panelists who tell us how to implement strategic objectives. Sustainability. You might know that this principle stems from Germany 300 years ago. It's a principle from forestry, and it says don't extract more than you add to the system. Or don't pack more on the donkey than it can carry, to put it very simple. This principle needs to be simply maintained. It's valid for 300 years, and it will be valid for the next 300 years to come. And you all know about this triangle, the sustainability triangle of social, economic, and environmental factors. I believe it needs to have a basis of identity, values, and maybe also democracy. We have experienced in the last 2 years 3 world summits on the Sustainable Development Goals, on the climate change, and on the new urban agenda, which set out a large tableau of objectives. They were put in these 17 development goals, and I believe all what claims to be smart has to be in line with these 17 goals. Otherwise, it is not smart. So we need to check each and every smart technology. Does it add to these 17 goals? And is it in line with that? Or at least, does it not contradict these 17 goals and the respective indicators to these goals? And all in all, when we look at these conferences, I think, and I believe, and I also heard from the mayors in the previous panels, yes, there is it's time for a paradigm shift from anything goes to high time for change or transformation, as we usually say. There need to be ways found out towards a global action-oriented transformation. The way is pathed by these strategic conferences, by the new urban agenda, which Turkey was also a part of. I had the pleasure to take the seat at the New York Assembly for Turkey. Then integrated urban development comprises of all these elements of smartness and future orientation. But again, smartness is one element of many others of climate protection, sustainability, resilience, digitization, adaptation, mitigation, and so on and so forth. It is not the guiding image. It has a serving function. This is something we try to pursue with the German cities, either in the so-called Leipzig Charter, which is valid for the member countries of the EU, integrated urban development, or in the papers we provide our member cities with, which also comprises smart cities, resilience, and sufficiency. The image of smart cities sometimes generated in this way, and I believe this is not the physical image we should connect smart cities with. It is rather a different connotation of smartness. Smartness is first to gather the knowledge we all have, our own knowledge, the knowledge of our counterparts in the cities, of all stakeholders in the cities, the tacit knowledge, as the scientists say. Then data, then the use of synergies, which I mentioned before, and maybe then also the introduction of intelligent technologies. So smartness for us has a little bit different connotation. Thinking first, compiling what we need to come to solutions, and then solutions with smart technologies as long as they are in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Resilience is a swing back to stable after a crisis, and we have a doctor on the panel. He knows about resilience, as this is a medical term. So when you're a patient and you swim back after having been ill, then you are a resilient patient. So all in all, this means more thinking and adaptable, small-scale and reversible planning and building, not the big schemes, and maybe even not the big houses. Resilient cities are cities which can cope with natural catastrophes. It's a protection against the unforeseeable, the storm waters, hailstorm, heat islands, landslides, floods, storms, blackouts, deprems, earthquakes. And as we experience 300 millimeter rain within 3 hours, meanwhile, even in German cities, not in the tropics. We have to prepare for this. This is resilience. And the last term, sufficiency. Is it a new paradigm from sustainability to sufficiency? It's about self-restraintness, it's about modestness in urban development, and I'm not sure whether this is a solution in view of growth, in view of mobilization of the people, in view of the per capita rate of individual car ownership. Nevertheless, we believe sufficiency is a prerequisite. It won't become easier, and we don't know yet how all the pieces fit together. We don't know how to achieve it via restrictions, via insightfulness of the people due to lack of resources, or via market forces. It's all open, but we tend to walk towards a new triangle, the sufficiency triangle. Sufficiency means less, efficiency means better, and consistency means different. So maybe this gives some material to think it over. We have gathered also in English on our website 55 projects on the planning practice of German cities which try to cope with these prerequisites. And just to show 2-3 examples, it's a harbor city in Hamburg which we believe is in line with these principles. It is Freiburg, Vauban, the reshaping of an old barrack area, in Turkish context very low density. And it is the Dortmund Phoenix city at the site of an old steel plant which has been exported to China, a new city quarter which looks today like this. Lessons learned finally. We need an integrated urban development approach to compile a common understanding of cities and their needs. We need content and options for actions to focus on short-term solutions which unfold long-term effects. And strikingly important in Germany for the last years, without participation of all stakeholders, there will be no widespread impact and no sustainable development. Sustainable and integrated urban development is unprofitable. It needs investment and it needs public investments. And finally, public money needs to be spent for public interests and not for private infrastructure. The private sector has to pay for itself. This is one of the prerequisites of the investment paradigms in German cities. And last but not least, the young lady has grown up. It's meanwhile 6 years old. Last month I visited Istanbul with her to see her grandfather at his 82nd birthday. And yes, the motive is still the same. The older she becomes, the more I find it valuable to work to prevent us from this grim outlook, the scenarios until 2090, with +9 degree max in the world, +4 degree in our regions. This is not what we strive for. And maybe we also need a self-critical outlook, as the philosophers and NGOs in Germany do. They ask why we don't do what we deem necessary about the power of traditional thinking. So it's rather the counterstream than the mainstream which is required to think of smart cities in future. And maybe it's all easier digestible if we look at films, either Racing Extinction or Before the Flood, or to listen to somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio. He says, if you do not believe in climate change, you do not believe in facts. I'm not sure whether we really have green light at the moment, globally spoken, or whether it's rather on red or on red and yellow. But I feel pretty confident that Turkish cities have understood the message, and hence I would like now to get to my panelists and ask them for the solutions. Last message, şehrinizi seviniz. Love your cities, that might be a solution. Here we go. There was a term that we should look after, gender equality. We are a little bit late in this and we cannot repair it now. But all the ladies feel invited already now to raise fingers at least later on. When I studied in Turkey, more than 50% of my classmates in 1984-85 were female. And I asked myself, where did they all go to that they are not on the panel now? So I nevertheless welcome you full-heartedly, gentlemen. And I briefly introduce you to Dr. Lütfü SAVAŞ, who is a doctor by profession. I feel very confident to discuss matters on resilience, sufficiency, sustainability, and smart cities with him. I would also, at the same time, like to introduce Mücahit YANILMAZ, the mayor of ELAZIÐ, who is an engineer. So we have an ideal combination. And we have, last but not least, probably the most important, the supplier side with Şekip KARAKAYA, the chairman of SAMPAŞ, who supplies for all what at the end of the planning process we deem necessary to be applied in the cities to make them smarter.